Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. The open expanse of the countryside has always soothed my soul. There's something about the rolling green hills dotted with trees, the chirping bird songs floating on the breeze, and the golden rays of the sun warming the earth that fills me with a sense of peace. So when I finally achieved my dream of building my own home on a sprawling few acres of land far from the noise and chaos of the city, I felt like I had found my own personal paradise. My name is Mark Hayes, and I've lived on this little slice of heaven for over 10 wonderful years now. Out here, away from the crowds and traffic, I've built a life of comfort and success. I run my own technology company, Haytech Solutions, from my home office inside the large, custom-designed house I had constructed. The crown jewel of my property is the enormous detached garage and workshop located just a short walk from the main house. Above it, I built a fully furnished guest apartment where friends and family can stay when they visit my rural retreat. Everything was perfectly idyllic until about a year ago when a new neighbor moved into the property next door. John Boyd seemed polite and friendly enough when I first met him. I even invited the 40-something bachelor over for dinner several times after he finished settling into the old farmhouse on his land. But it didn't take long before subtle hints of jealousy and resentment started peeking through John's congenial veneer. I began noticing him staring with narrowed eyes at my manicured lawn, or glaring with thinly veiled envy when friends arrived in their fancy cars for my summer barbecues. The indications were slight, but it became increasingly clear he coveted the success I had achieved out here in the countryside. The real trouble started when I decided to expand my garage workshop by adding another bay and building a small apartment loft above the entire structure. I was eager to have a self-contained space for guests to stay in comfort and privacy. John stopped by the first day of construction, casually mentioning that the garage looked like it now crossed partly over the property line we shared. I assured him the building was well within the boundaries of my land according to the official survey I had done. He merely shrugged and went back home. A few days later, I was stunned to have John show up waving some handwritten documents, claiming they proved he actually owned half of my property, according to an alleged agreement with the previous owner. The whole thing seemed very suspicious, but before I could fully look into the legitimacy of these documents, disaster struck. The very next morning, when I went out to inspect the construction progress, I was shocked to discover John had erected an enormous wooden privacy fence across the entire front side of my garage, completely blocking access to the structure. I was furious. I immediately called the county authorities to report the illegal obstruction on my own land. After tense negotiations, they forced John to grudgingly dismantle the outrageous fence. I wish I could say that was the end of the saga, but sadly John's harassment had only just begun. Exactly 1 week later, I awoke to find a tall iron fence obstructing my garage yet again. This time I didn't hesitate. I called my lawyer to put an end to these antics once and for all. My lawyer rapidly confirmed what I already knew. The documents John produced were entirely fraudulent. We promptly filed a lawsuit against him for harassment and intimidation, presenting my legitimate property deeds clearly defining the boundaries. I also installed security cameras in case John tried anything else. The judge agreed John was clearly in the wrong and ordered him to immediately remove the fence blocking my garage and pay damages for the trouble. But John stubbornly refused to comply. When the county sheriff came to enforce the court order, he found John had barricaded himself inside his house. After an armed standoff lasting hours, John was finally arrested for contempt of court when he tried making a run for it in his pickup truck. As he was carted off to await trial in jail, I breathed a sigh of relief knowing he could no longer cause trouble on my property. Or so I believed. As it turned out, John had one more vindictive trick up his sleeve. During the highly dramatic court trial, it came to light that John had a long history of bullying anyone he perceived as more successful than himself. Former neighbors testified about the vicious feuds he instigated over minor property line disagreements that turned frighteningly aggressive. My lawyer methodically presented ironclad evidence proving John had falsified the documents in a brazen attempt to swindle me out of half of my valuable land. Handwriting experts confirmed John had crudely forged the signatures himself. In the end, the jury unanimously found John guilty of harassment, forgery, trespassing, and contempt of court. The unapologetic John was sentenced to over 3 years in state prison for his disturbing criminal behavior. With this dangerous, unstable man finally off the streets and far away, I proceeded to pick up the pieces of my once peaceful life. I hired security experts to install an imposing, electronically controlled gate across the driveway so no one can ever again obstruct access to my property. I upgraded the security system to include motion sensors and cameras covering every angle, and I replanted the line of trees John had uprooted along our shared boundary in his pathological crusade against me. In the years since, I've heard John was released from prison early for good behavior, but I'm relieved to say he has not shown his face nor caused any more trouble around here. The lessons from this frightening harassment forced me to take precautions, however. I joined the local neighborhood watch and routinely photograph any unusual activity near my borders. With the stillness of the countryside once again my companion, I sometimes wonder if John ever found the help he obviously needed, or if his pathological jealousy still simmers, waiting to boil over upon his next unsuspecting victim. I can only hope that man learned you simply cannot intimidate and bully your way through life at the expense of others. His reign of terror on my doorstep taught me to stand up for myself against anyone trying to take what's rightfully mine. In the end, justice prevailed, and I now rest easy knowing my little slice of paradise is protected. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I used to have a Veterans Disability Pension, VDP, for a hearing defect. It's now merged with my state pension. It was small, and back home it was paid annually. However, I moved to the UK, and this pension was still paid by my government, but now administered by the UK DWP, Department of Work and Pensions, who paid it fortnightly. Some years ago, I was entitled to a disability allowance, DA, because of various issues. At the time, I was diagnosed with diabetes, but was trying to control it with diet, so I got called into the local job center for an interview. Unfortunately, I had a Karen for an interviewer. I'm on the spectrum, but I'm high functioning. This means that I don't suffer fools gladly, and I can be very rules-bound. Firstly, she questions why I hadn't declared the VDP as part of my earnings. I had, but it was in another part of the form. Then she said that I couldn't have diabetes because I wasn't taking any medicine, and as I was telling lies, she would not allow my claim. Now, the DA claim had nothing to do with my diabetes. However, she was stupid to put in her letter of rejection that I didn't have diabetes because I wasn't taking any medicine for it. She also said that they would no longer pay my VDP. I sent a copy of the letter to my High Commission, who said, "Don't worry, they would deal with it." I handed a copy of the letter to my doctor, who was incensed. She complained to the DWP, asking about Karen's medical qualifications. So I got asked to have another interview at around 1 p.m. on a certain day with Karen. I said that I couldn't guarantee attending on that day as I had another appointment that morning. The message back from Karen was, if I didn't attend, my claim would be refused. So going with the flow, I said that I would try to attend, but I might be a little late. So I had my morning appointment, went home, changed, and headed off to the job center. I arrived there at exactly 1 p.m., only to find that Karen had booked an interview room on the first floor instead of the ground floor. There was no lift. To cut a long story short, it took me nearly 15 minutes to haul myself up those stairs, with the help of a guy in a suit who asked why I was trying to get to the first floor. I told him that I had an interview and that Karen, who was seeing me, chose the room. Finally, I reached the room and Karen said, "You're late. I am refusing your claim unless you have a very good reason." So I said to her, "Well, my day has been interesting. You were warned that I had an appointment this morning, and because of it, I might be late." Karen: "I want you to tell me about this appointment and exactly what happened to make you late." Me: "I turned up at the appointment this morning, took my clothes off, and then had two nice young ladies apply lube to my genitals. They then proceeded to conduct a procedure. They asked me to lie down on my side facing the wall, and one of them inserted her fingers into my rectum." Karen: "How dare you talk such filth in front of me? Your case is closed." Suit, who was listening out of sight: "Excuse me, Karen, but you did ask him to tell you about his appointment and exactly what happened to make him late." Suit to me: "How did your prostate examination go?" Me: "More tests, unfortunately." Suit: "And was that the reason you were late?" Me: "No, the supervisor was being vindictive and interviewed me on this floor instead of the ground floor. She knew my claim was because I had breathing problems and couldn't climb stairs. I think she would have claimed that since I made it to the first floor, I was lying and refused the claim." Suit: "I think you are right." Suit to Karen: "You will approve his DLA claim. I had to help him up the stairs and based on my observations, he qualifies. Both you and your manager will report to me tomorrow at 9 a.m. in my office to explain your actions. If you are late, you will be terminated. Karen, very white-faced. Yes, sir. Turns out he was an area director that the DWP had sent in to investigate the high level of complaints about that job center. It also turns out that a complaint from a high commissioner about breaching an international agreement is a big deal for the DWP. Who knew? The next one is a petty revenge story. I was working at a Tim Hortons in my youth, think 19, 20 years old, and I prided myself on polite and courteous service. I was always cheerful and tried my best to fill orders promptly. I managed this by telling myself that even the worst customer could just be a normal person on the most terrible day of their life. I usually brightened people's days and saw many grumpy people leave happier because of me, until the Karen came in. I was dealing with a lunch rush, which means for several hours people streamed in as if food and drink had never existed and would never exist again. So there were a lot of people to get through. A lot. So under these conditions, the Karen showed herself. She was belligerent, rude, and had a truly massive order to fill. Nothing I couldn't handle. However, she had several drinks ordered, think 8 different beverages, and she had 3 dozen donuts, which is fine, nothing out of the ordinary. But she had to have them specifically in a certain order in the boxes, and this took time as she ordered me about. No problem, I've dealt with weirder things while working there. The line, however, was backing up while I was serving her, and her true colors were starting to show as I filled her order. Then we get to check out. I start to ring her up. She changes her order, 3rd time, again, and wants to add 4 sandwiches. I say, ma'am, could we ring the drink and donuts through first? Until I ring you through completely, it ties up a cash register. The Karen screeches, I won't pay more taxes on my order, you won't cheat me! I stare rather dumbfounded at this logic. I tried to argue with her, saying, ma'am, this won't increase your taxes, it's just faster. The Karen interrupts, no, I won't be cheated, you hear me? And I shoot a deeply apologetic glance at my coworkers who are now regretfully dealing with a crowd with 1 less cash register. Then I proceed to head to the deli to make her sandwiches as fast as I physically can so I can get back to the counter. The Karen smugly chides and reproaches me while I make her order, telling me, you're making the sandwich wrong, and tries several times to order me about as if I were a complete idiot. As I'm finishing my 2nd sandwich for this woman, I am getting irritated with her attitude. I, still politely, inform her that I have to assemble the sandwiches in a certain order. I even have a physical chart to follow. I could get fired for not following the chart. She harumphs at me while muttering under her breath about how no one respects their elders anymore, and duck you, and more angrily, idiot, when I'm beginning the 4th sandwich. My sunny disposition was leaving me at this point. This woman obviously had no respect for me, thinks I'm incompetent, and doesn't care if she insults me. So impulsively, I came up with a plan as I finished up the 4th and final sandwich. Smacking my head, I say, oh, I almost forgot! The Karen grumbles, forgot what? I say, well, we have a new promotional offer and I almost forgot to ask you about it. You see, Tim Hortons has been doing ergonomic studies and has found that right-handed people and left-handed people hold bags differently. The Karen looks interested, so I continue. So with these findings, they designed ergonomic bags for their customers as a promotional offer. Would you like to participate? The Karen huffs at me. Of course I want to participate. I give my best customer service smile and say, okay, would you like a left-handed bag or a right-handed bag? The Karen looks offended. A right-handed one, of course. I say, of course, ma'am, and duck down below the counter to quietly rummage through the completely identical bags I have. I decide to take the whole thing a step further, and I pop back up with a look of pure regret on my face. I'm so sorry, ma'am, we only have left-handed bags left. Is that okay? The Karen is upset with this turn of events, but does not wish to lose out on the promotion. Ugh, fine, she says icily and grabs her order. I ring her through and watch her walk out the door with complete satisfaction in my soul. The added cherry? I heard her complaining about her left-handed bag to her friend as she walked out with her order, and the confused look on the friend's face was priceless, as this woman idioted and moaned about this completely made-up problem. I never did anything like this before or since. She was a special kind of a-hole, the Karen with the left-handed bag. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Background. I was taking an elective criminal forensic, CSI stuff, night course at a local community college. The best part about taking this course was the instructor, which meant an in-depth tour at the U.S. Criminal Forensic Lab where he worked as the question document examiner. That is, handwriting analysis, signature matching, etc. Also, since computers were barely introduced into forensics at this time, all handwriting analysis matching was done by hand, and this instructor was one of, if not the best, in the world. The MC, as good as I remember, it was a great course studying many facets of criminal forensics and taking the amazing lab tour. As the course was coming to an end, the question document facet approached, the instructor's specialty. At the end of the class, just before it started, the instructor wrote a paragraph on the board, and we each had 2 sheets of blank lined paper. He told us to write the paragraph, only the paragraph, any way we want on one sheet, and then again on the other sheet, trying to disguise our handwriting. You are committing forgery. The instructor left, and we all started writing. When done, one student, not me, collected all the sheets, mixed them up, and took them to the instructor. We all looked forward to the next class where the instructor would present matched sheets, then explain to us why our forgery attempts failed, and how he would testify in court to prove it. Because I wanted to go home, I made it easy on myself. For my forgery attempt, I wrote the paragraph in print on one sheet and in cursive on the other sheet, even though we were told that it is a failed way to disguise handwriting. Now, for a little background on my handwriting, it's bad. I mean really bad, and I have held pencils, pens wrong since I learned to write. The easiest way to explain it is, I write with a closed fist, right-handed. In elementary school, my parents hired a tutor to try to teach me to write again from scratch, including putting plastic things on pencils to make my preferred grip uncomfortable, but it failed miserably. In high school, I had a teacher tell me I would amount to nothing because I had issues writing legibly. Basically, my print is somewhat legible and my cursive good luck, but that should make no difference? Now back to the story. At the beginning of the next class, the normally happy-go-lucky instructor looked very upset as he walked in. The first words out of his mouth were, if anyone played a practical joke on him, he did not appreciate it. The whole class, about 15 students, looked at each other totally confused. The instructor then again tried to get someone to confess, but we all continued to look confused. The instructor calmed down a little and decided to continue with the class as he would normally have done so. From the stack of papers he was handed at the end of the last class, he picked out the top 2 sheets and said in court speak how he deduced that the same person wrote both paragraphs. Then a student would admit it was their failed forgery attempt, and the instructor would continue with the next 2 sheets. When there were just 2 sheets left, the instructor lifted them up for all the class to see. Looking straight at me, he said he could not testify in court, saying the same person wrote both paragraphs. With a scared look on my face, I said both sheets were mine, and I wrote both paragraphs. So in front of the instructor and the whole class, I again wrote the paragraph, once in print and once in cursive. The instructor walked away, shaking his head and mumbling something like he had never seen this before. After that, the instructor looked at and spoke to me differently, as my classmates created some obvious nicknames for me, for example, the Forger. I got an A in the class and was very happy when it ended. The next one is an entitled People Story. This happened when I was in middle school, back in the days of wired headphones, so around 2011 or something. I've 24M currently, been a type 1 diabetic since I was about 4 years old, and I use a continuous glucose monitor and an insulin pump. I had an IEP, so all my teachers were told about it, and that I would need my insulin pump in class, that it might make noise, and I might have to pull it out of my pocket and mess with it if I needed insulin, or I might need to drink a juice pouch, and I was able to do so at my discretion. We had one teacher who was a complete hard-ass for no reason. She was notorious for making kids cry during presentations. She even told one girl who wanted to be a doctor to find a cure for cancer, because her little sister had childhood cancer, that she would need to actually be smart to do that while chuckling to herself. Let a kid dream, man. We were like 12 years old. As you can imagine, she was also at war with technology, and on a side note, these days I use my phone to check my glucose and give myself an insulin bolus. I can't imagine being a kid today and dealing with a teacher like that when the lines are blurred, and your smartphone actually is a life-saving medical device. But anyway, if you're not familiar with insulin pumps, the kind I use has a little tube that connects the pump, which has the insulin, to my body, which needs the insulin. This teacher also liked to be weirdly obtuse about things. Instead of being like other teachers and simply saying something like, "No cell phones in class, put it on my desk," which would allow me to remind them it's an insulin pump, and they'd usually say something like, "That's right, my bad," she would instead try to talk abstractly about what she wanted to happen while walking around the room. So this particular day, she kept alluding to students listening to music in class, that you should be careful what you do because she can see it, that us kids think we're so sneaky, but the adults know what we're up to. I obviously wasn't listening to music, so I figured she'd seen someone with headphones in the room, and the next thing I know, she had snuck up behind me with scissors. It took me a good moment to realize what exactly had happened because I was astonished. I was used to teachers thinking I had a cell phone or getting upset about my pump beeping during an exam, but no one had ever touched it before, much less cut my life-sustaining tube. I was actually sitting with my mouth agape, and she turned to me, now that she was at the front of the class again, and said something along the lines of, "Mr. Wunderly, care to share what tunes are more important than listening to class?" At this point, I had put together that she thought I was listening to music. She thought she cut my headphone wires. I replied, "Just the sound of my thoughts while I've still got any, since that was my insulin pump." She had to let me go to my locker to get my cell phone to call my mom to bring me a new infusion set. My parents insisted no cell phones until high school. But my mom was also scared with me being T1D and too dyslexic to remember a phone number, and she wanted me to easily be able to call her, so she got me a $15 Walmart phone and put minutes on it. And now I feel old. Then I just waited in the front office for her. She worked from home and drove like a bat out of hell. She was so angry. I don't ever want to see her that angry again in my life. It took 10 years off of me, and I wasn't even in trouble. The teacher apologized to me, and all the teachers got some more disability accommodation training or something. Kinda anticlimactic end, but a friend thought it was entertaining and that I should share. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.